Burnout isn't just about working too hard, it's about having nothing left over for the parts of life that matter. And sometimes it's not even the work itself that sucks, it's the lack of balance, the constant pull, and the inability to ever truly disconnect. In this episode, I sit down with Garrett Wood, a clinical hypnotherapist and wellness coach, to explore his journey from traditional jobs to finding real passion and purpose in his work. Garrett breaks down burnout not as a buzzword, but as a serious, escalating issue that can have tragic consequences if ignored. We talk through the 5 stages of burnout, why it's often confused with depression, and the subtle signals like changes in heart rate that tell us it's time to pay attention. We also dig into how technology has made help more accessible, yet more overwhelming, why the quality of information matters more than ever, and how coaching offers a powerful space for growth and support. Garrett challenges command and control leadership, which I really think is important in American workplace cultures today, and makes a compelling case for psychologically safe work environments, explaining why collaboration beats competition when it comes to sustainable performance. This episode is about turning burnout into breakthroughs, reconnecting with real human presence, and redefining how we show up at work and in life. Let's roll right in. All right, welcome to the Work Sucks, But I Like It podcast. Today we have Garrett Wood. He's a clinical hypnotherapist. He's a national board certified health and wellness coach, an executive functioning specialist with over 18 years of experience. And as he likes to say, turn your burnout into a breakthrough. Garrett, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me here, Tony.
No, awesome. Can you define work for us, Garrett? I always have the guests do that first question right out of the bat.
In this day and age, it's probably effort for cash or compensation.
So when you see your work that you do, is it just for cash, just for compensation?
No, and I'm lucky enough that I get to work in my passion. So I'm excited about what I get to do. I'm driven to do it because I'm passionate about it more than I am about the compensation, probably to my own detriment at times even.
No, I love that. So let's let's explore that transition because I think it's an interesting one where we kind of like start doing work that's more intrinsically motivating. Can you walk us through the point where it sucked, I guess, with your 9 to 5 job or what do you want to call it here for your story? Can you walk us through that and that sort of like aha moment of your passion now?
Yeah, I think that I've been lucky enough that I've always been kind of interested in the work I did. There were times where I was actually cleaning trailers to raise money as a Boy Scout so I could go to the Boy Scout camp, the high adventure camp. It was pretty exciting. And it was not the most exciting work, but it was fun being there with my troop members and then knowing that every little effort I made was going to go towards this experience that I was excited about. I've also been a dishwasher, server, bartender for a long time, but I've also been a personal trainer, strength conditioning coach, and then a regional manager with 7 locations. And for me, anytime work started sucking, it was because there was just not enough left over for what felt like was appropriate for me. So it wasn't even the work itself. It's just that balance wasn't there. There wasn't enough of anything but work at times.
Can you describe that sort of balance? Was it like not enough extrinsic reward from the person you were working for? Was it, yeah, walk us through that. That's interesting.
Yeah, I they say if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And I absolutely disagree with that. I think for a lot of people, if you love what you do, you will always be working to some extent. And that can be dangerous because you're excited to see the outcomes and the impact and all the things that can happen and that you can change and make and the benefits for other people. But that can be so overwhelming and so stimulating that these other things that are important, like going to the bathroom, drinking water, getting sleep, enjoying your relationships, taking care of your own health and well-being, those things can kind of take like a very distant back burner or not even on the stove. They could be on, your neighbor's place. And so that gets challenging and stressful. And I think if you don't have access to those other things that make a life worth living and it's just about work, it almost doesn't even matter how much you enjoy it. It's going to be detrimental for you.
So how did you, make this transition from being the dishwasher, all these other things to you're
Yeah.
a therapist now and you're a coach? Walk
Yeah.
us through that. That's pretty cool, actually.
Oh, we don't have enough time in the day for that one. But,
Yeah, right.
but the highlight is every time I kind of felt stuck in my life, I'd raise my hand and ask for help. There's smart people out there that have been doing things for a long time. And then I'd go and get the help I needed. And then at the end of it, I'd be like, oh, this is really interesting. And it would kind of send me back to the drawing board to go look for some more of those opportunities to help other people the same way I was helped.
So that's really interesting, Garrett. So like today, when I picture people raising their hand, if you will, for help, they're going to Google, they're going to AI.
Why is it I guess, what are your thoughts on that, first of all?
It's a good jumping off point, right? You used to have to go to a library and dig at a bunch of dusty shelves, and now it's right there in your pocket. It's pretty accessible for a lot of people, so I like that, especially if you're trying to figure out how to get help in those little downtime in between, instead of being eating your cereal in the morning, reading the cereal box. Now you could be scrolling and looking up some positive, powerful information. The hard part is sometimes it feels so easy and it's so broad and so general that the specific help you need versus what you have access to, there's a large gap there. And it's really hard to develop the wisdom to know what's the most applicable for you versus what's a good idea, what's a great idea, or what's the right idea for you to do in that moment. That's, I think, the challenge now.
No, I like that a lot. So one of the things we talk about, Garrett, on this show here is that good luck is not a matter. I mean, success is not a matter of good luck; it's good skills. So, what is the skill to kind of navigate that information today? How do we gain this wisdom that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think making sure you are checking the quality of the sources. Knowledge is an imperfect experience. The more we know, we don't know, and how much
Yeah.
more we will never be able to know. And so, approaching everything with that, like, kind of epistemological humbleness, where you can show up and be willing to be wrong and change your mind when presented with new evidence. And that if you find yourself thinking that this is the absolute truth, that's when you've gone too far. That might be where you needed to rein it back in a little bit. There's not enough qualifiers there to actually make it something that's personable enough to be actionable and beneficial.
So, where do you see your work as a hypnotherapist and the coach as well with this? When people are on their search, for things, how does your work fit in with this?
Yeah, most of the people when they're searching for help and I show up is burnout. It's which stage of burnout am I in now? It's such a ubiquitous term that everyone just kind of shrugs it off. But I've worked with people for a long time. And one of the colleagues that I worked with in like a pretty high pressured environment, he'd been with the organization for 20 plus years of their 25. So like most of their time. And anytime I was struggling, I would look to him and I'm like, man, he's got it together. So like, I better suck it up and do better. Maybe I need to work smarter or something here. But I was in a meeting 2 weeks after he was suddenly let go with his replacement. And in that meeting where we were going through, I was sitting there being like, wow, like this is strange having this other person here instead of him. And then also that was so quick. And now it's 2 weeks after 20 years. And here's this new person that he's been replaced by. And even worse, in that meeting, we'd gotten word from another colleague that he had actually given so much of himself to that position, that title, those relationships for so long that after he was let go, he didn't feel like there was enough in his own life that was worth living for. And that was a really big wake up call for me was health and wellness is important. Caring for yourself is important. Work and passion are great. And burnout is so ubiquitous, but it doesn't mean that it's not tragic. And it can cost people their lives.
Wow. So you mentioned that burnout has stages. Can you walk us through what those stages are? I mean, this guy literally burned out. I guess what are the stages leading up to burnout?
Yeah. So in our stages of burnout, there's commonly referred to as like the 5 stages of burnout. The last one is you've been in burnout for so long that you can't remember not living in it. And in that stage, it's really challenging for mental health professionals to even know the difference between depression and like a major depressive episode and burnout because they're so overwhelming that it's really challenging to try to differentiate between those two are. In the first stage of burnout, on the other side, man, it just feels like you've had a couple bad days, 2 or 3 really bad sleepless nights. When your mind goes wandering, it wanders to the problems at work. And that's normal. Most people are expected to go into that stage. It's just how often and how frequently and how long once you're there do you stay there. That drifts us from stage 1 to stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. That stage 3 is where people most of the time are looking for help. That's when they're doing their searching on their phone as they're sipping down their coffee on their morning commute or whatever it may be.
And then calling you, I guess, as well. Does
Hopefully,
that
or
hopefully
someone
no
like me that can help them. Yeah.
no, excellent. So what is that stage? So just out of curiosity, you talked in terms of frequency, in terms of length. I guess is there like a quantifiable like thing you can put to that? I guess I'm just curious now. Like what's that threshold here?
I think that, I mean, if we were to look at it from a physiological perspective, we would notice a change in people's heart rate variability. So their recovery rate would be greatly diminished. And even if they were doing the things that, going for a walk, doing some breathing exercises, great, it might have like a momentary effect on their mood and even on their physiology. But at the end of the night, it would still be in those lower numbers. And it would be really challenging to get out of there. Once you're in that state, even when good things happen, even when you're responsible for making them happen, you're so disconnected from it. You're so emotionally numb. You're so jaded. You're so fatigued. You're almost cynical in a sense that even the good stuff doesn't register. It's easier to discount it as luck instead of skill when you're in that
Mm,
state.
mm. So everyone's got a smartwatch these days. So if I'm looking at my heart rate, how do I know if I'm going to be, stage 3 or whatever? Like, I guess how do we? Is there like a range, if you will, for heart rate? That's interesting. How do you get the data? I guess let's first start with that. How do you get that data?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of different algorithms out there that have different norms for that. The challenge is everyone has their own different set point of what that would look like depending on their own condition. And so what we're looking for is changes and trends over time. And so if you've been, having a nice steady heart rate of 55 beats per minute, that could be low for somebody, it could be high for somebody else, depending on their natural physiological state. But if all of a sudden you see that 10 or 15 points higher and you're just sitting there answering emails, that's indicative that something's going on, some type of stress. And even if you put someone through like an assessment, a psychological evaluation where we're looking for the perceived stress scale, sometimes they won't even register it, but their body will be
Mm.
registering it. It's almost like that buddy in college where he'd had one too many drinks and he was like, I can drive. And you're like, no, cannot drive right now. But they're so oblivious because they're inebriated that they don't notice their gaps in their ability to make those judgments, but also to have that motor function. And it's the same thing when we're in a state of burnout or sleep deprivation. We're unaware of our own impairments in those moments. And so we wouldn't even be able to say like, oh, I'm really stressed out. We just like, it's just a normal day. But sometimes our physiology, the heart rate variability markers can give us a little peek behind the curtain.
So when you're working with someone, can you walk us through like that data analysis? I think that's really important. You've got sort of a direct measure with the heart rate, then you have the self-reporting, which is obviously biased. I love the drunk
Absolutely.
driving thing, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
But yeah, can you walk us through that?
Yeah, there's so many things that affect people's well-being. So many different things you can focus on improving. There's a Dan John, he's a strength coach that worked with mostly high school kids, but a couple Olympians. And he has this thing where he gets to say like, hey, there's these 5 movements. And if you're not doing one of those 5, we're just going to do that one because that's going to give us the biggest lift. And so with a lot of the clients, we look at kind of these big 7 drivers that consciously or subconsciously impede their ability to create well-being in their life or create friction for them. Even if they're moving towards something that's helpful for them, the amount of effort it takes is really challenging. And so there's no return on investment there. And so we kind of take them through this A3 framework, which is assess. And once we know what those 7 drivers are, what their unique nervous system needs are, we can then talk about how we can accommodate them. And then from there, we can be like, all right, well, what's the work you need to do? And how can we align that work with how your nervous system actually works best?
Interesting. So the 7 drivers, what do you see as a more common one, I guess, with people? Is there a trend in that or?
Yeah, if we were to rank them in order of popularity, like if you were to scroll on
Yeah.
social media, perfectionism, imposter syndrome, procrastination, those tend to be some of those limiting beliefs that we chose to decide that we were going to believe about ourselves at a young age, and then they're showing up now, keeping us stuck. That's probably the most common one. The next one would be those attachment styles, how it feels safe for you to be in a relationship with someone else and how you seek that safety. A lot of times people talk about bad bosses or, oh, they're a sink or swim boss or they're a micromanager. Um, and often the same leader with the same behavior will appear to be like a very hands-off person to one and then be accused of being a micromanager by someone else. And it's more about the difference between those two people and their team's attachment styles than it is about any of the actual behaviors of that person. So that's a pretty common one.
So when we talk about burnout, we're typically thinking like workplace culture. Do you see, I guess, outside of work, right? If you will, outside the 9 to 5, are there other factors that are influencing burnout?
Yeah. There's a new study out there where they just put it into like an actual assessment that you can kind of take through that's scientifically validated. And the idea is like, can you disconnect from work? Is that okay to do? And so there's internal reasons why it would be challenging for you to choose to disconnect from work. And then there'd be actual cultural ones, expectations that are built into the expectation of the job. And then there's like very real, if you're a solo entrepreneur, if you're not working, work isn't getting done. That's challenging for a lot of people that are running a small business. If they're not doing okay, their business isn't okay. So there's always this drive to want to do more. But then we can also talk about, is it okay to put out of office on your email, or are you going to get shamed, blamed, or guilt or feared for doing that? If it's after hours and you get a text from whoever, can you ignore it and not have, that affect your performance review at the end of the corner? Or if you have a team member that you care about and you're in the leadership position and they reach out, do you have the strength and stamina to be able to be present with them in that moment, even as you go through your life? That piece is really challenging in this day and age because people are working at 2 a.m. because they can work from anywhere. You used to go to a place, do the work, and then leave. But now every tool you need, just like the internet for Google in your pocket, it's there with you wherever you are. So the burnout rates are rising because there's less time away from work now than there's ever been before. Less formal time away.
Do you see a generational difference too, Garrett, with all this?
I do. I think a lot of younger people are comfortable with the remote work and trying to fit it into a lifestyle where they can take their dental appointments and their dog for a walk throughout the day as need be, and still get their work done. And then there's other people that think, okay, no, when we're at work, we do work and nothing else. But there's natural starts and stops in people's workflows throughout the day. So if we're in an office and we're more in the historical office culture as it has been for the last 40 years, you start something and they need someone else's input. If there's nothing else for you to do in that moment, you're just standing around. That's where we had that water cooler talk or cigarette breaks or, on Mad Men, they went and had the martini lunches, right? But now, if you're working at home, that's where you could take the dog walk, unload the dishwasher, make a connection with a friend. We've always had those moments built in. But what's interesting now is if you do work in an office while you're waiting for that, usually it's you or 3 other people there. It's not like a nice 50-person office. So that water cooler talk isn't you with 5 people. It's you scrolling on whatever social media, having a parasocial relationship with an influencer, which is very different for culture and compatibility, which also adds to isolation and burnout.
So I'd like to talk more about, I guess, like the phone use, right? You mentioned, people are socializing, if you with the water cooler, but they're really on their phone. What are your thoughts around phone use and burnout?
Uh, I would not be surprised. I don't know if any of the apps are going to fund this, but if someone chose to get funding to see how much phone usage relative to symptoms of burnout and depression and anxiety, there are some studies out there that say that kids that are more on their phone than not are more likely to be isolated, depressed, and anxious. But sometimes if we're depressed and anxious, it's easy to reach for our phone to try to kind of deal with some of those feelings. So we have a little bit of a chicken and or egg situation there. So it'd be hard to differentiate those two. But yeah, either way, it's a sign that something isn't going well.
So I guess walk us through why coaching is important for you today. Like, why is that work important to work with? I guess I'm going to assume one on one. It's not necessarily group, right? So it's one on one. Why is coaching important for you today?
For me, that idea to be able to sit with someone and work through whatever the specifics is going on with that person in front of you, I think is really lost. I feel like in this day and age, we have a lot of alone time. We do have some time with others, but having that attunement where someone's tuning in and being present with you and 100% there with no agenda of their own other than one that's there to support and serve you, it's a really unique experience that most of us don't have access to. And even sometimes we'll go and read books and we'll go back and, there's been a rise of the Stoicism and Marcus Aurelius's meditations lately in different circles. And if you read through the ancient Greek philosophers, most of those are written as dialogues between 2 people talking about an idea over time and coming to more thorough, non-shallow conclusions that challenge a lot of their assumptions. And when you're talking with other people outside of a coaching agreement, sometimes challenging your own assumptions doesn't feel safe because that person is working an agenda for themselves or they have their own emotional relationship. And so you're trying to navigate both of those at the same time, which makes it really complicated. There's a lot of things that coaching does that are very beneficial for most of us that we don't get access to elsewhere.
That's incredible. So, in terms of interpersonal skills, when you're coaching someone, Garrett, what do you see as the opportunity in terms of, again, the development of, I call it social skills, if you will, today? What are you seeing that people are missing, I guess? Are they missing something? Maybe they're perfect.
Yeah. So most people, I wouldn't say they're missing social skills per se. I think it's opportunities to be present socially. Yeah. When they're presented with the right opportunity, it naturally flows. When someone's calm and in a regulated state in their own nervous system and they're attuned to you, it's very easy, even for introverted and shy people, to be social with someone else in that environment. It's very different if you're in a different environment where that person isn't regulated, they're not attuned to you, and it feels like something else is happening. And so that's when we kind of shut down. You don't always get the best of ourselves. We hit that natural resistance in some of those environments. And so what you see from someone is more a reflection of what that dynamic is happening and less about their innate ability, capacity, or skill at that time.
Interesting. So, in terms of like, I guess, workplace culture, when we talk about psychologically safe spaces, can you comment, I guess, on that?
Yeah. A lot of our leadership styles, um, are interesting. They've been inherited, from command and control hierarchical structures. They've been imported over from like military settings, which I'm sure a lot of those systems when we're literally talking about life and death and like acceptable losses and casualties, that style of leadership is very different than we're talking about getting this next round of emails out, getting clients booked in and enjoying having this process of collaboration and creativity and like a general feel good process. I don't think those are apples to apples. And I think a lot of our historical leadership and management books treat them as if they're the same. These captains of industry and the leadership styles of these great men that started most of management theory and leadership styles, um, were the same idea, captain of industry, captain in military, right? Sometimes the titles are even there. What I do think is happening now is we're seeing a more relational style where we're understanding that leaders and figureheads of organizations are actually our surrogate stand-in for our caregivers. They're no longer our parents, but they are acting as if they are that or could be that. And if you're a little kid and you're going through something, you're stressed, you fall and scrape your knee and you look up to your parent to see like, is this a big deal? Is it not a big deal? Should I be worried? Should I not be worried? And it's more about their emotional reaction that actually even affects how severe that pain feels to you. And it's the same thing as an adult. If you're going through a stressful situation at work, you're getting frustrated, you don't know exactly what to do. If it feels safe enough to turn to that person who's supposed to be there to help support you and have them attuned to you, it makes it really easy to get back into that neutral nervous system and carry on with that work in a collaborative way. If it doesn't feel easy, we stay in that state of distress for a longer period of time. And anytime we're there, it's no longer going to be a psychologically safe environment for us to be in.
Do you see any differences from a cultural standpoint, like with America versus, I don't know if you worked internationally? I guess, what are your thoughts or experiences with that?
Yeah, I have a few clients that US, is not their culture of origin. And they have commented about how different it feels here versus where it's felt from their original culture. It feels so much more competitive and less collaborative here. It feels very much like here's my job description. I do this, I do that. And there's less willingness to pick up other people unprompted. And so if you're a caring, driven, passionate person, and you're more than willing to do your share and others too, and then expect that implicitly from someone else without asking it, it actually puts those people in harm's way in our culture, the way it's set up here, because they end up doing more of their fair share and not getting their support on the back end, which also leads to burnout.
If we break down this competition that's like, I guess, kind of the root cause, definitely giving the fuel to burnout here. How do we, in a workplace culture, how do we break down that competition? I guess I'll let you go from there.
Yeah. So that adversarialness, sometimes people like here in the States, there's the Chariots of Fire movie. I don't know if you remember, it's like the 4 minute mile being broken by two men. And it's this, they're championing each other and one's pushing harder and then they push harder and they push harder. And then we have this amazing excellence, right? And that archetype of a story of how achievements are done is pretty pervasive. We also think about like the Cold War, the space race, who's going to be the the real superpower nation between the US and Russia here, the first one to get into space. Similar type of story. And a lot of people think that innovation and resourcefulness comes from necessity. It comes from being backed into a corner and then having just to do something. And that might be one way, but I don't know if you've ever stood on top of a building that's, 500 feet off the ground and had a 2-inch wide plank that you had to walk from to the other side. It does not matter how long you've been walking, how skilled you've been walking. You're going to look at that and the stakes are going to feel so high and the risk so great that even the thought of making a mistake usually paralyzes people. But now if we strap you in, we put a net underneath you, we don't change the height or anything. All of a sudden, it's a little bit easier to take that first, second, third step, develop some more mastery, calm your nervous system, be able to continue on. And so sometimes that competitiveness sacrifices our ability to show up and actually be generative with our effort. It paralyzes us because the stakes feel so high. That's not true for everybody. It's not true all the time. But I do think that we have this idea of comfort zone versus growth zone. And I think if we actually expanded that safety zone for people, no matter what that means, we would be able to move them to where they could perform better and move outside of that comfort zone with less effort, more ease.
What are your thoughts then? As is it safe to say, I guess from what I'm gathering, what I'm hearing is like if we're trying to take the conversation from more like I call it extrinsic, rewards, motivation to more intrinsic. Is that kind of a safe thing to say based on what you said? I know it's a little
Intrinsic,
complicated.
yeah.
No.
Um, Intrinsic for sure, absolutely has to be a necessary component. But then if we devoid that from community, we lose some of the benefit too, because doing something with someone else, a lot of people think attraction is, very like pheromone driven or like visually driven. But a lot of time for people, there's another type of attraction that comes from collaborative effort where you're doing something, they're doing it with you, and all of a sudden we're here together and something new and exciting and sparks are happening here. That is definitely a part of it. And that is extrinsic. It's, I want to do this work. They want to do this work. We happen to be doing it here. And look how much better it is for all of us because we're doing this collaborative effort. In an ideal scenario, that's the type of magnetic like system you'd want to see.
So what would you recommend for like workplace cultures to build this team building sort of environment, this atmosphere? What do you recommend for today, American culture?
Yeah. Um, some of the reason why I would typically work with leaders directly is because if they're not okay, everybody else that's around them is not going to be okay. And so if we can increase their well-being, they can get regulated. It's easier for them to be that attachment figure for others, which means that when they're distressed, they can turn to them and it's a safe space for them. If they're not okay, there is that like roadblock where they start butting heads. They're dysregulated. They come in with a dysregulation. It gets worse. They get worse. And now everyone's worse off. And I think a lot of our frustration and burnout at work is from that, specific with leaders. There's a lot of people not stepping up because they don't want to see that. There's a lot of leaders retiring because they're so overwhelmed with this. And so we have this like deficit of leadership in a lot of big institutional organizations. And it seems to be growing, not shrinking. And it's not about compensation necessarily. It's about this mix between formal traditional models and what's actually needed in the workplace to avoid burnout and get good work done.
That's so interesting. So when you're working with these leaders, I mean, change can suck, right? So how do you like, I guess, motivate them to see the benefits of where you're trying to coach them on?
Most of the people that I work with, they've raised their hand to ask for help. So the motivation's intrinsic there. They realize that, yes, they are the expert in their own experience and they've had a lot of success. And they've also realized where they've reached the point of diminishing returns, that like doubling down on this initiative, whatever that may be, whether it's a beer, another run, or yelling, or a very pleasing email, or taking on someone's emotional burden, it's no longer being effective and it's actually harming them and the results of the work they're doing. And so they're very motivated. They're very curious about, okay, the math isn't mathing. What do I need to do? Where's the equation wrong? Is it an order of priority? Is it what's happening here? And so it's pretty exciting to be able to work with such a motivated population that's curious and compassionate with themselves to move through that.
That's awesome. So Garrett, this is the Work Sucks, but I Like It podcast. Walk us through what sucks right now in your work and what you're doing to make it not suck.
Yeah. Um, In the work that I do now, most people have to be present on social media to be able to have enough of a signal to noise ratio to cut through the clutter. Um, and what's interesting is because production has been so democratized, there is a lot of noise out there. And so you have to really have an extra strong signal. And it feels like that strength and doubling down has to continue to exponentially increase, which is a challenge because that's time taking away from being with people doing that work. And so that internal tug between talking about the work or doing the work is the hard part now.
So basically, kind of say like the marketing of your work, right? More or
Yeah.
less. I'm with you,
Yeah.
man. That's I feel the same way. I feel the same
Yeah.
way. That's so
Yeah.
funny. Well, Garrett, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. If the audience wants to reach out to you, what's a great place for them to check you out?
Yeah, if they're really professional and they want to keep that way, they can follow me on the professional platform, LinkedIn. If they're more personable, we can hang out on Instagram. But if they're really interested, they could just go to my website and we could touch base directly at gnosistherapy.com.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, Garrett, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me here, Tony. Super fun.
This conversation with Garrett is a powerful reminder that burnout isn't a personal failure, it's a signal that something needs to be assessed, accommodated, and realigned. When work seeps into every corner of our lives, when we can't disconnect, and when human connection is replaced by endless scrolling, the cost is real and sometimes devastating. Remember, success is not about good luck, it's good skills. The skill to take from this episode is awareness. Pay attention to the signals your body is giving you. Maybe you track your heart rate on your watch. Create boundaries even when you love the work. And if you're leading others, remember that psychologically safe relational environments don't just improve well being, they improve performance. Collaboration over competition. Remember that. Think presence over noise. Thanks for spending this time with us on Work Sucks, but I Like It. Until next time, take care of yourself because increasing your well being has a ripple effect far beyond just you.
And there's a wind that blows.